Good afternoon. I'm Lillian Lodge Copenhaver, Dean Emeritus and Professor in the School of Journalism and Mass Communication here at Florida International University. It is my pleasure to welcome you to the third presentation in our Leadership Webinar series for the Lillian Lodge Copenhaver Center for the Advancement of Women in Communication. The mission of our center is to empower young women, both academics and professionals, in order to develop visionaries and leaders in all of the fields of mass communication and to enable them to make changes in their communities and in their professions. Let me also encourage you to visit our research forum, which is becoming the go-to place for studies on women in communication. These activities, plus many others that we will be having throughout the year, are designed to provide us with a point where we can become the thought leadership center for the development of new leaders for the next generation of communicators. So thank you for joining us today, and let me encourage you to visit us at copenhavercenter.org. It is now my pleasure to present Dr. Maria Elena Villar, who will be the host for our webinar today. Maria Elena.
Hello, thank you so much for joining us, those of you that are here in person and those of you that are joining us online. I'm delighted to welcome Liz Roldan to our third leadership webinar. Ms. Roldan is the news director of WFOR-TV, or CBS4, in South Florida, after a brief time of being interim news director. Prior to that, she served as executive producer of special projects and investigations for CBS4, and she was also worked there earlier as assignment manager. She's been in the South Florida television market for more than 20 years. Before returning to CBS, she was managing editor at WTVJ, and has also held positions as director of marketing and public relations. She is an Emmy Award winner and member of the National Academy for Television and Art Sciences. She holds a bachelor's degree in broadcast journalism from University of Texas at Austin. She's a married mother of two and has a lot of lessons to share about balancing the demands of a professional career and an active family life. So please join me in welcoming Liz Roldan to the third leadership webinar at the Copenhaver Center. So Liz, if you could tell us a little bit about your career path and your trajectory to leadership. That's the emphasis of the center, is how to help women in communications become leaders. So if you could tell us a little bit about how you moved ahead and moved up and how you made some decisions along the way, and any insights you can share with our students.
Sure. Well, first of all, thank you very much for having me. Thank you guys for showing up, and for those of you online, thank you. Thank you, Dr. Copenhaver, for inviting me. What I tell everyone is the same thing. Do what you love and do what you like. I always loved news since I was a kid. Couldn't get enough of it, reading it, watching it on television. And I was very, very fortunate. And it's so funny that we're here to talk about women's roles. And I think the people that come into your life that influence you, sometimes you just don't really realize it until much later. I was very fortunate when I was a sophomore in high school at St. Agnes Academy in Houston, Texas, to have a nun who was approximately 4'6". Sister Hillary was the journalism teacher. And she was amazing. She was an absolute force to be reckoned with, and it was all about writing. And I was awful, god awful, at math and science. I mean bad. And I was perfectly average in every way. I wasn't an A student, I wasn't a B student. I was absolutely middle of the road. I was just sort of there. The only thing that I could do really, really well was write. And Sister Hillary somehow, I don't even remember, but she plucked me out of nowhere, and before I knew it, I was writing all kinds of things for our student newspaper. And I thought it was phenomenal. And so I think it was, I was a junior in high school when I decided I want to study journalism. And that was it. And it stuck. And I went to the University of Texas, and I wanted to study broadcast. At UT, it was there were different tracks. There was print, there was PR, there was advertising, and there was broadcast. And the broadcast program at the University of Texas at the time
was 10 students per year. That's it. And you had to audition. You had to do an on-camera. You had to write. You had to take a current events quiz. You had to do all these things. And I did everything, but I failed the current events quiz because I got one question wrong, and I will never forget who it was, what the question was. Who was the minority whip? I didn't even know what a minority whip was. And I'll never forget, it was Newt Gingrich. And from that day forward, I got myself a 7-day-a-week subscription to the New York Times, which I still have to this day. So I had to sit out a year from the broadcast program. And I was determined to do it, and I went back the following year and I got into the program, and it was the best thing I ever did. So I'm telling you that because you may have a goal and there may be some hiccups that come up along the way, but if that's something that you want to do, if that's what your passion is, if that's where your desire is, and that's what you have to do. I get people all the time who say to me, oh my God, I want to be on television, but this job is open, so I'm going to go be a salesperson. And I say, well, that's your decision, and I respect that. But if what you want to do is this, then you need to do this, no matter where it is that takes you. And it may feel like you're really, really far from your goal, but that's what you want to do, so go do it. Don't settle for anything else. So Sister Hillary was the first woman who really came into my life and helped me and pushed me and saw something in me. So I went and I studied broadcast journalism. And I don't know how it is here, but in most broadcast tracks, it's all about training you to be on camera. And I'm here to tell you that you don't get to make any decisions when you're on camera. You get to make the decisions when you're behind the scenes. And that's what I wanted. I wanted to be part of that editorial process. I wanted to understand what makes a story, how do you decide this story versus that story. That's where the influence lies, and that's where you can truly find your voice. And that was, for me, what it was all about, was developing that voice. So I studied broadcast. I had an amazing group of professors there who really pushed me. And I graduated, and I moved to Miami 2 weeks later, and I'm still here. And I don't know how that happened, but I am. I never expected it to be that way. I moved to Miami. I had an internship at Channel 23. I was working at a law firm during the day, and I was an intern at night. So I was working about an 18-hour day and loving every second of it. My first story, which you should all Google, was Baby Lollipops, a really horrific case that shook me up, but was the most incredible thing I've ever done in my life. I worked as an intern for, I think, maybe 2-3 months, and I got a phone call. I used to answer the phones at the assignment desk at Channel 23, and I would go out when they needed help. And 2 or 3 months after I started, I got a phone call from the same place where I work now. Back then in 1990, it was WCIX. And they called me and they said, we need a weekend assignment editor. We think you'd be great. And I said, okay. And I went in for the interview and I said, no, you guys are crazy. Literally, I can't do that. I can't do that. I don't even know, like, I come from Houston. I don't know anything about Miami. I could be an assistant. I could be somebody's assistant. And they said, no, we're going to weekend assignment. Okay. So I took the job, and I was, oh my God, it was intense. And I used to take everything home, and like the Friday night before I would go in by myself on a Saturday morning, all these things are happening, what am I going to cover? And that's how I started, on the weekend assignment desk at WCIX, and just progressively worked my way through. I came up to the assignment desk. There's a couple of different tracks in any newsroom. There's editorial, which encompasses the folks on the air, the producers, the assignment desk. That was what I wanted. I was in love with the editorial process. What's a story? How can I tell my story better than you can tell your story? And that's what I did. So I worked my way up through the assignment desk ranks, weekends, mornings, overnights, nights, you name it. I did it. And then I ultimately, I think it was 5 years in, I became the assignment manager at WCIX. Then the switch happened. You guys probably weren't even born. 6 became 4, and 4 became 6. And so in 1995, a couple of weeks after the switch happened, I left and I went to work at WTVJ. Everybody thought I was crazy, and I was there for 13 years. I was the assignment manager when I started. I popped out to have a couple of kids, popped back in. 3 months after I had each kid, I came right back to work. And then I became managing editor, I want to say, right after Elion. And I was there till 2008 when they sold the station, and I left because I was in upper management. We were all told we were going to all be fired. So I left, and I went to work at a company that 93 days after I started was shut down by the federal government. No joke. I was unemployed for 9 months, lost everything I had except for my house, and then I became, through I don't know how, I got this job at this little tiny children's theater doing marketing and PR. And I said, I've never done anything but news my entire life, but I'll give you everything I got. And that's what I did. And I did that for, I think, a year and a half. And WFOR came calling in 2011 and hired me as the EP of Special Projects. And a week, maybe 2 after I started, the guy who hired me decided he was leaving, and I was asked to do his job plus mine. So I did both for a while, and I got this job, and here I am. So that's sort of my career trajectory. And
Fantastic.
you know, that's the thing with news, is you just never know exactly what it is that's going to happen and how it's going to happen. But news involves a tremendous amount of dedication, a tremendous amount of sacrifice, and you kind of have to sort of throw yourself in, and you have to be all in. You know, news is not a, oh, I want to work 9 to 4. It's just not. It can be some days, but not really, because news is, you know, till 6:30. It's an intense, it can be overwhelming for some people, it can be all-consuming for others, but it can also be incredibly gratifying if you can stop long enough to try to find your own voice and figure out a way to share that with other people.
What about, you know, rising to a leadership position as a woman? What are your thoughts on that? Did you think it's different being a woman than being a man?
No. I mean, I'm going to be, I should tell you all, I'm a very, very straightforward, very honest. I don't think about that for 1 second. Not one. I am who I am. I'm here because I'm really, really, really good at doing news. And that's all I think about. I don't think about you versus you versus you. What do you bring to the table? You know, you each have a very different story. You each have a very different perspective. You each have a very different interest. And that's what makes any newsroom what it should be, which is a mosaic. Mm-hmm. You know, each of us has a piece and a role to play, and it's my job as news director to figure out how to bring those pieces together and make sure that there's diversity of thought, diversity of experience. It doesn't matter to me that I'm female versus, you know, I am what I am. I've never been anything
coming
different.
up in the career, you didn't find that to be a factor at all?
I just never thought about it. I was more interested and more concerned with, how's my story going to be better than yours? You know, I want my story to stand out. I want to be aggressive. I want to be compelling. I want to be interesting. I want to be thought-provoking. I want to be innovative. I don't worry about my gender. I worry about my brain.
And so you don't think you were evaluated by your gender at all?
I certainly hope not.
And I do too. So I want to follow up on a couple of things that you said. One of the messages that I got from what you said is that you have to be brave.
Hell yeah.
And do things that you might not know if you're ready to do.
My
that's
career,
part of leadership, I believe.
My career has gone its path because I was forced to be brave. Not everybody can be. I'm not saying it's easy. I had a, you know, and I really stopped to think a lot about the women that impacted me, and Sister Hillary was the first one. I was unbelievably fortunate, and I think Sandy worked for her too. We worked for a news director, Yvette Miley. Yvette Miley is currently the #2 person at MSNBC and probably the single most influential person in my career. And why? Why would she be that influential? Yvette pushed me in areas that I never thought I could go. Pushed me to do things that I never thought I could do. And I am forever grateful for that. And it's my job as a leader, as a news director now, to look at the people that I have working with me, not for me, with me. How do I get them to be creative and innovative and go in a direction that they may not necessarily even think they're capable of going? Because that's what Yvette did for me. And that's my I have a very solemn function as a journalist, but as a newsroom leader, that's the other very, very solemn function that I have, is to evaluate you in a way that how can I get you to be what I think you can be? You may not think you can be that, but I see it, and I see it in you. How do I do that? You know, that's my challenge on a daily basis.
One of the recurring themes in the series is mentorship, and you know, we advise all our students to seek for seek mentors and learn from people, and also the responsibility of successful professionals to become mentors for the next generation. Do you have any thoughts or advice on kind of identifying potential mentors and
well, you know, it's I'm always hesitant to give advice. You know, who am I? You know, that's kind of, it's really and truly how I feel. What I have is a wealth of experience. I think it can be very difficult to find a real mentor. You know, you can ask, but then, you know, how do you really, you know, so it becomes a situation where you have to have sort of a kinship of some sort. There has to be some sort of connecting factor, and this is just my personal, humble opinion. I think there has to be some sort of connection for the mentorship to be true. And if it's not true, it's a waste of everybody's time. The last thing you want to be is a nag, you know, but you want to know that that mentor is truly there for you. I have, do I mentor people? CBS has asked me, I think 3 years running now, every year I go to the NABJ, which is the National Association of Black Journalists. I go to their convention, and I view tapes for days on end. It's an endless, excruciating process. 3 days of viewing tapes, person after person after person. I'll see 100 people. There may be 5 that I connect with, truly, you know, that actually, where they take the time to reach out to me after the fact, and we make a connection. There are certain people that have reached out to me on Twitter. If you follow me, I get them all the time. At least once a week, someone's sending me a tweet, hey, can you look at my link, what about this? It's very hard to establish that sort of connection, particularly when you're dealing with the volume that I'm dealing with. I think when I left this morning, I had upwards of 13,000 emails in my email inbox. It's a lot to manage, you know, so there may be people that I want to connect with, that I want to mentor, but man, it can be a brutal process. So what I encourage always is stick with it, you know. If it's, make that phone call. I pick up my own phone, you know, which shocks some people, but it's me. Sure, what's up? You have to remind me. I meet a lot of people. I connect with a lot of people. I talk with a lot of people. But that mentorship can come in anything from a little bit of advice. You know, hey, can we meet for a coffee for 15 minutes? Can we talk on the phone for 5? These are my options. What do you think? I have a couple of my own mentors that I connect with, but you have to be the driver of that process. You know, it has to be true, and for it to be true, you have to want to connect to that person, not just because you believe you have an obligation. Oh, this is someone with an important title. I have some connection to her. I have an opportunity. Let me see what I can do. That's really not. You're going to hear from me the word truth a lot. You know, you have to be honest with yourself, and you have to be honest with the person that you're interacting with. And I think when you are true and present in that, this is what I brought, nothing, and I did it intentionally because I wanted to be present in this moment, and I wanted to give you my truth. And what you take away from me is what you want. I don't want to be boring. I want to be engaging. I want to be interesting. But what you're going to get is my truth. And I encourage you all, if you can be as fortunate as I've been to find. I have 2 people, just two, that I have who mentor me, that I trust implicitly with every detail of my career. And they've given me advice that I have, in some situations, rejected because I opted to stay true to what I wanted to do, and in some situations I've accepted their advice. But it has to be a meaningful, continuing dialogue, and you have to constantly stay connected with them. You know, and that's hard. It's really, really hard.
So, We have a question from one of the participants online.
Oh, super.
And if any of you here have questions, please raise your hand so I can see you. But it had to do with the interconnection or the transition from working in TV news and then PR and marketing and then back to TV news. Something that we talk about a lot in our disciplines, right, as we're teaching, is how the lines between the different disciplines are blurring. So can you tell us a little bit about how your experience in journalism helped you or not in public relations, and what it was like to transition back after doing that?
I sucked at PR. I just really did. It was, why? I think it's yes, the lines are blurred, and I think that there's a perception that you can go from one discipline to the other. Forgive me if this is something I shouldn't say. I don't believe that to be the case. I think that you have a very specific mentality as a journalist, very specific, and you should have that mentality, and you need that mentality, and you need to have a little bit of it's a different view than you do as a PR person. That's not to say that you don't have certain skill sets that are absolutely, look, PR people are there to sell stories. As a journalist, I'm there to sell my story as well. You know, I've got to sell what I'm writing, I've got to sell what I'm producing, I've got to sell my show. I'm all about selling what it is. What do I mean by that? Best video, best sound. Sorry, I'm going to talk about broadcast because that's what I am. Best sound, best images, rock my world with those pictures. I want you to watch my show. I don't want you to watch something else. I want you to watch me. So how do I do that? I got to pick the best stuff. It's all about how you present it. As a PR person, and again, I was, you know, in that for a very short period of time, and I'm very frank with why I was doing that. I couldn't get a job to save my life. I couldn't even get a job at Starbucks because I was too stressed out by the machine, and I burned my hand with the steam machine, and I mean, I really tried, but I was awful at it. And you know, in terms of while I worked at the Playground Theater, they were so good to me, and I would say at least once a week, I have no idea what I'm doing. I mean, just none. I'm working on pure instinct. You got some great pictures, you got some great stories. So I just kind of took what I knew, my discipline as a journalist, and tried to sort of create a storyline with I had no experience. I was never taught as a PR person, nothing. But I knew what would make a good story, and I knew what would make a good television story in particular, and so that's where I tried. But I do believe that the mindsets are completely different, and I think that that's okay.
But journalists are, to a great extent, the target audience of public relations. So the assumption is, right, that folks that know journalism have a special insight to be public relations practitioners because they know what journalists are looking for. How would you respond
I mean,
to
I
that?
think that that's the perception. I think that any PR person knows the same thing that any journalist does. Do you watch television? Do you read newspapers? Do you read magazines? You're the target audience. I mean, that's, you know, I hate to be so blunt about it, but that's it. I watch, I read, I listen, I absorb, and you should as well. It's just the mechanics may be different to how we approach things, but if you watch and read, you are the consumer. You know, you are the viewer. So you're no different than I am. It's just how you're going to present that. I get forever going back as far as I can think. I was asked by PR groups, "Oh, can you come to our session to teach us how to write a press release?" Sure, no problem. You don't need to learn how to write a press release from me. You need to know how to reach me. Those are two very different things. Because if you can reach me, that's half the battle.
So we have another question from one of our online participants, which is about Miami as a media market, right? So the first part of the question is why you chose to come to Miami from Texas, and the other is how do you think Miami is different than other places?
Oh wow, that's so easy. Okay, we'll start with the first part. Why Miami? I graduated the University of Texas, and I did not want to be on the air. I was very clear that I wanted to be involved in the actual editorial process, which when you're on the air, you don't get to make those choices. I had a cousin who lived in Miami, who owned a law firm, who said, "Hey, why don't you come to Miami, work in my law firm, I'll pay you. I have a client who is an anchor at Channel 23. She can get you an internship. Sold. So going back to what we talked about being brave, you know, you have to sometimes, I think, be open to the opportunities that your life will afford you. You have to be present enough in the moment to recognize them when they happen. That does require risk. It requires some bravery on your part, but I think in the end, ultimately, if you know what you want to do and your life affords you these opportunities and you're willing to go for it, things will happen. You know, you have to be, and I don't want to be so esoteric about things and philosophical, but now is when things happen and you don't really realize what they are. And you don't want to close yourself up to the opportunities that you just may not realize are being built in front of you, you know? So that's why I came to Miami, to be perfectly frank.
How is it different?
How is it? Oh, have you watched television? I mean, did you see the insanity of Justin Bieber last week? That just doesn't happen. You know, here's the deal. I moved here in 1990, so it's been 24 years. I had no intention of staying for 24 years in Miami. This is an unbelievable news town. If you really love news, if you truly love news, as I do, there is no better market, period. There are bigger markets. There are markets with a higher number. We're only 16 in our market number. That's because if you know anything about television news, where our market size is based on our population size. So stop for a minute and consider how many people live in New York versus how many people live in Miami. You know? Now, I challenge you, go to Chicago and watch the news. It's boring. Miami's not that way. Miami's fast. Miami has insane things that have happened. When I stop and think about all the insane things that Sandy and I have covered over the course of our 20-plus careers, we've done it all, man. It's unbelievable. It's absolute candy. You cannot get a better news town. That's why I'm here.
Okay. We have a question from the audience.
Hi.
You mentioned how it's overwhelming, which is obvious.
Sure.
How do you manage that? I know everyone obviously is going to go through that.
The best I can. You know, I'm imperfect. I'm a flawed individual. There are a lot of things that I do really well. There are a lot of things I do very poorly. I just do the best I can, and I don't get hung up on guilt. You know, I give it, if it's my children, if it's my family, if it's my work, I give you everything I got, and sometimes it's not going to be enough, and I'm okay with that because I've given everything I've had. And I just, I was asked to speak at a conference on Sheryl Sandberg's book, Leaning In. I don't lean in, I jump in, I go face first, and I just do the best that I can, and that's that, you know.
So another important topic that comes up in these webinars as our students, you know, are getting ready to face their professional careers and often also their personal lives. Mm-hmm. What do you think, you know, what insights can you provide about balancing personal life and career?
I don't know.
To give them both the most.
I find this question, I find it crazy. I think you should ask my children that sometimes, not me. Look, I am who I am. I do what I do. You know, I balance to the best of my ability. I fail sometimes. I completely forgot something colossally important to my son. Sorry. You know, I'll make it up to you. My kids, I was pregnant with both of my children. I've never, you know, they were on the assignment desk listening to scanners. What can I tell you? They don't know anything different. They know who I am. They know what I do. They know that at a moment's notice they could get a text. I got to go out of town. I got to go. I got to stay. I worked last night because Sandy and I worked last night. A lot of us did because the Grammys were on. News. That's why, going back to the very first thing that I said, you know, you have to know what you love, whatever it is. And if you love it, then you figure out a way to make it all possible. News requires sacrifice. We do not ever work standard hours. I think on average, on a daily basis, work approximately a 13-hour day, every day. I could at any time be called in. My phone goes off all the time. Since I've been sitting here, I've had 19 emails. just since I cleared it so that we could have this, so we could go back and make a reference. We'll check it again when we end. So you do the best you can. There are some things, you know, email is a brutal thing. Oh my God, you didn't answer my email. Dude, that's because I've got like 150 that just came in the last hour. You know, give me a break. You know, so you just do the best you can. And my children, my family, they know what I do. They know what I'm all about. And that's kind of it. But you have to be true to who you are and what works for you and what works for your situation, what works for your family, what works for your passion. I'm in a place where this is what I'm very honest with myself and with the people around me. And that's all I can give you. But you have to stay true to who you are.
And it seems that, you know, one of the notes I made when you were first speaking was about having a goal early on, and then what you just said now is that, and then you build your life around that goal. You know, when you teach students, especially undergrads, you know, probably about half of them know what they love already. They know from high school exactly what they love and what they'd like to be doing. But a lot of them, and I was included in that group when I was in college, don't know exactly what they want to do. How do you think someone finds their passion?
Wow, well, isn't that sort of like the quintessential question of life? I mean, wow.
And you're supposed to know the answer.
Yeah, and I'm supposed to know the answer. I don't think so, sorry. Well, you know, it comes back to who are you and what do you want to do and what's your truth, you know? And that may change from one year to the next, I don't know, you know, but you have to sort of be able to be open, I guess, it would be the right way to explain it. You have to be open to experience opportunities and moments and events in your life and people who will influence you. You won't know until one day you're sitting in your car and something hits you like a ton of bricks. Oh my God, wow. You know, my most fervent wish to come out of this event is that someone will just think about what I said 2 days from now and go, wow, you know, so be present in the moment and what's your truth? And have that, okay, and it may not be anything of what I'm talking about. I hope that the journalism students who are watching will go, okay, yeah, you know, it's all about my voice, you know, because that's, for me, that's the single most important thing. I would die without a voice. And I don't mean a physical voice, I mean being able to, you know, have a moment where I can choose a story versus another story. That's what voice is all about, you know, and that's for me the single most important thing.
So this is another question from one of the participants online. One of the characteristics of the current media environment is the two-way, you know, the immediate feedback.
Interaction, yeah.
Yeah. How is it to receive immediate feedback or criticism from the audience, and how do you react to viewers that are dissatisfied? How does that work from your perspective?
I reply to them all, and they may be harsh. I have one that I have to deal with when I get back to the office. We got a lot of, not a lot, I mean, a handful, maybe half dozen, some nasty emails from some people last week who were really not happy with our coverage of Justin Bieber. So I go through and I get criticisms on the editorial side. I get criticisms on the what people are wearing on the air, how they look on the air, things that they said on the air. You name it. So it's my job, that is part of my job function. I go through and I respond to all of them. It's not an easy process. I'm not going to necessarily win them all. If at the end of the day your vow is to never watch CBS 4 again, I'm sorry to have lost you as a viewer. We can have this conversation. We can do it over the phone. I'd prefer to do it over the phone. And I'll answer all your questions honestly. You know, you may not understand why we made the decision that we made. You may not respect the decision that we made. You may not agree with the decision that we made, but ultimately you will get me on the phone and we'll have a conversation, and it's okay. You know, if that's your choice, so be it. I respect that, because we're here to serve our viewers, and if that particular viewer doesn't like something that we've done, so be it. You know, so how do I deal with it? Face forward.
have a
I have a
couple.
question. I have two questions actually. What do you find is like, I guess, the biggest challenge of your job? And then the second question would be, I forgot what it was.
Well, let me answer the first one, and then you can think about it. So the biggest challenge of my job is not the editorial process. You know, that's not. The biggest challenge of my job is that it feels like, and I've never had this position before. I should have said that earlier, so forgive me. So I'm a first-time news director. So what I find is, it's overwhelming sometimes, the amount of personnel issues. There's a lot of administrative stuff that comes up. There's all kinds of problems. You know, you wouldn't believe half the stuff that I told you. Whether they be interpersonal issues, whether they be issues with equipment, it's all that administrative stuff that has nothing to do with news. That is really can take on a life of its own. But it's part of the process, you know, and that has to, there's a lot of people that I manage, and all of those people need my time. And so the biggest challenge is making sure that I am present and not behind some door, and really involved in what's going on with all the folks that work in our newsroom, and make sure that they know that I am available when they need me. Okay, good.
Being that you are so honest and so blunt about everything, do you find it hard to deal with people that aren't
Sure.
as honest? Like,
Yeah.
Is it a rarity?
No.
No? I mean, is it a rarity to find someone that is honest?
No, it's not a rarity, but I tell people this all the time. I mean what I say, and I say what I mean. You don't ever have to walk out of my office and interpret what you think I meant.
But that's a rarity.
It's different. It's hard for some people to really, okay, but she said this, but she meant that, and so I'm going to do this because I think she likes. I mean, Sandy goes through this all the time. People will say to her, "Oh no, but Liz likes this." No, man, it's not about Liz. You know, it's not about Liz. It's about the viewer. It's about the people that we serve. I'm acting as the viewer's agent. I want the best story possible. How do I get you to watch at 11 p.m.? How? How am I going to get you to watch the story that we have that's on at 11:15? Think about it for 2 minutes, and it blows your mind. It's hard. It's not easy. That's what we are faced with. That's our challenge. How do I get you to watch a newscast? Do any of you in this room watch a local television newscast prior to my knowing that I was coming here?
Do you?
Anybody? Raise your hand, please. Oh, sweet, 3 people. See, so my challenge is, how do I get any of you to care about what it is that I'm doing? I could have the most incredible stories on the air. You have no idea. You have no clue.
Well, along those lines, how do you interact with online? How does your job interact with online?
I'm on Twitter, as some of you know. The folks, there's a completely separate unit. There's a completely separate unit that oversees the website and all of our social media. I think that we have to, as an industry, be very involved with people on Twitter specifically. Why? Because we can interact one-on-one, personally, instantly, immediately. I go out of my way, even when they're nasty, and sometimes they can be very nasty. I had a lot of trolls last week. Those Bieber people are very
Intense.
They can be pretty mean. Yeah, no, they really can. I was kind of like shocked. I was like, oh, I'm going to block that one. You don't need to yell at me in all caps. But I think that's our opportunity to show personality. We always have to be professional, and we are journalists. That's first and foremost. But I think it's a great opportunity to interact with people and exchange ideas and be a little bit. You have to be able to communicate and not just on the box. So look, I don't have all that figured out. I'm not some media savant who's got it all laid out. We have a lot of things that we can do better, but I think wanting to do better is half the battle.
Okay. We have another question from the audience.
I wanted to ask, what was your first glimpse of reality once you graduated from the University of Texas, and what is your recommendation for upcoming seniors who are about to graduate from college?
There is no greater dose of reality than having your first story be a dead child who was emaciated in a bush, beaten to a pulp by his mother. It doesn't get any more real than that, ever. You know, that's it. So dose of reality is when you hit the street. You know, you live in a cocoon when you're in college. It's a lovely, wonderful, fabulous cocoon. I'm not saying things are easy. They're not. There's a lot of challenge. But the minute that you hit the street, as a reporter, as a producer, as anything working in news, it is a dose of reality, and you don't know anything about anything. And all the people around you have been on the street for quite a few years. So again, my question is, how do I get you to watch my story versus someone else's? You know, that's a very rude awakening. And when you're involved in your first, it's called a scrum. When you're involved in your first media scrum and there's, I don't know, 100 cameras and reporters and producers, it's really intimidating. And you're like, hell, man, what am I doing here? And how am I ever going to get to that point? You know, how am I ever going to get to be that good where I know where everything is, who to call, whose phone number? I used to be mesmerized by some of the people around me. I worked with, was very, very fortunate at TVJ to work with a reporter, amazing reporter, Nick Bogert, was in the market for 25 years. He had everybody in his cell phone, and I was like, oh, how do you do that? How do you get them to even give you your phone, you know? And that's part of the process, you know? And you have to learn how to work with people. I was, from the day I started at WTVJ to the day I left, I produced Nick Bogert's stories. And I learned so much from Nick. I asked him a million questions. I'm sure I drove him crazy. But then we hit a certain point, and it's going back to being brave. You know, Nick always, you know, I need this video, I need that, I need this interview. And I would go and I would do it and I would get it. And I tried to be as brave as I could, not knowing anything, I felt. But I learned from him, I absorbed from him. I tried to be as good as I could be, and when I made mistakes, and I made them, I still make them every single day, learn from them. What could I have done better? What could I have done differently? How did you do this that yours came out so differently than mine? You know, I think that's part of that reality, and again, being present enough to want to improve.
We have another question from the audience.
Jumping back to social media, I noticed that your Twitter handle carries like the CBS4 name on there. Do you feel that like impedes like your ability to express yourself on social media at all?
As the news director, that's always present for me, always. So if you look at my social media, yeah, I love shoes, I love clothes. I mean, that's part of who I am as a human being. But I am never, and the reason that I made the conscious choice to put the CBS4 attached to my name is because as news director, I am never not CBS4, ever. Sorry, that was my stomach.
So, another question from one of the online participants. Sure. You mentioned before that your job is to make a good story, to tell a story that's good that people will want to watch. What makes a great newsworthy story? That is the question.
Wow, that's a great question. Props to whoever asked it. You know, it can change from day to day, hour to hour, moment to moment. There could be a story at 9 o'clock in the morning that I think is spectacular, and by noon I've already moved on because there's something better. And that's what makes Miami so amazing. What makes a good story is always, again, television is my medium. I don't speak for newspapers, I don't speak for magazines, I don't speak for the web. We need pictures. Good, compelling video, images are our business. Sound is our business. If I have a compelling interview with someone who becomes my character as a reporter, that's what we always want. Who's our character? Who are we speaking through? The character draws you in. If you see someone who is emotional, it tends to be a better interview than someone who's just talking like this. So those things together make for a good story. Let's talk about Justin Bieber. That was a great story. whether you like him or not, whether you think it was news or not, it couldn't, I mean, wow, hello, really? So let's just break it down. Super famous pop star arrested at 4 in the morning on Miami Beach for drag racing in a Lamborghini in a neighborhood, father present. Wow, okay, put all those things together, that kind of makes for an interesting mix. We were just in the car on the way up reading about a sex assault. So is a sex assault a good story? I don't know. It depends. We had a situation a couple of weeks ago where there was a guy who assaulted a woman, sexually assaulted a woman. And again, we can never forget our solemn function as journalists, and you have a responsibility. If there's a guy on the streets raping women in Miami, that's a story you have to do. Is it great? No. Do you want to watch it? No, but you should. You should. Because you live here and you should care.
Have you ever found it hard to find great stories?
Every day.
So what do you do when that happens?
You look, you get down and dirty and you start digging. That's why you have to have sources. That's why you have to, we are constantly, look, I brought Sandy with me because Sandy and I have worked together for a lifetime. Sandy is one of the best people in this market at finding stories. You have to get creative, you have to be innovative, and you have to dig deep. I don't want, no offense to any of the PR people in the room or who are watching on the web, I don't want a press release. That's the last thing I want. I don't want what everybody else is going to have. I want what's new, what's original. I want original reporting. I want good storytelling. I want something that's innovative that nobody knows about. I don't want to see it on every single station. The minute it's on every single station, I'm bored. I want to kick everyone's ass. No, make no mistake, I'm not joking. News is an incredibly competitive business, and if you don't have that gene, you're going to have trouble. The last thing I want is a press release.
Someone else have a question back there?
Hi.
In your opinion, what is the rationale in everyday past between the negative stories like the rapists and the something positive like sunshine?
Well, first of all, with all due respect, I don't think telling the story of a rapist is a negative story when we're trying to protect women on the street. That's real life. That's real life. What's the ratio? It depends, you know, we try very hard. Sometimes we're better at it than others, you know. We try very, very hard to not be a crime blotter, but when women are in danger, when people are in danger, it's our job to make sure that you know, so that you can protect yourself and the people that you know. Very clear. We have to balance that with the Justin Biebers of the world and the Grammys, and there's another guy who was arrested this morning for assaulting a woman who was dumb enough to ask him for a ride. We have to balance all of that. We're working on a story for this afternoon, a kid who was beaten to a pulp by a teacher. You know, but that's our challenge on a daily basis as producers, is to sit down and what do we have? We sit down nobody's asked, so I'll tell you. The way that news works, so formally we meet at 9 a.m. That's our first editorial meeting where we decide what the reporters are doing for the day. We have a noon show every day. We do the noon show. We meet after the noon show. What did everybody have? Because we have to be competitive. News is a competitive business, make no mistake. Did anybody have anything that we didn't have? Let's make sure we've got it in some fashion. We meet again after that, go over the decisions that we had made at 9. Do we need to change anything? More often than not, we change things. We meet again at 2:30 where we review the rundown for the 5 and the 6 o'clock newscast. We meet at 3 o'clock to decide what we're doing for the 11. I have another meeting the news starts at 5. I have another meeting at 5:15 to decide what it is that we're going to be doing during prime time. We have another meeting at 6 to review the 11 o'clock rundown, and we have the 11 o'clock. That's the day. And it's 150,000 phone calls and emails in between, and it changes on a dime. And you have to pivot with what's happening in the moment. And you have to make sure that you're always looking at that rundown, so that what's the ratio? You know, how much crime do we have? Can we separate it? Is there too much in the 5? Is there too much in the 5:30? Do we really need that story? What about this? We just saw this on the wire. This just broke. That 5 o'clock hour that we do is a living, well, every show that we do is a living, breathing organism, and it changes constantly, even when we're in it. That 5 o'clock show, for whatever reason, is the one that changes the most. That rundown goes out the window invariably every single day.
I have a question. To what extent do you consider how an issue might be framed for society, you know, based on how you cover it? Like, for example, in a situation of sexual violence, to what extent is there some sort of attribution of blame, or do you consider any of the kind of larger social issues when you're presenting a case, or does that not really come into play?
It comes into play oftentimes. However, to be perfectly frank, you're not able to make that situation come to light on the air that same day. So we have a special projects unit with 3 investigative reporters who oftentimes, in a situation like that, because it can be very difficult to address that in the moment, things like that get funneled into that special projects unit. I came from that special projects unit, so did Sandy. So we, the 2 of us in particular, have a very strong investigative bent to everything that we do. A lot of those stories will funnel into that unit, and you work on things on the longer term. Because while we don't necessarily do long form, we do long term, you know, and that's a whole different animal than what I've been talking about here, which is daily news. What we do in special projects can go anywhere. We had a story with Jim DeFeedy last year. He'd worked on the story for a year, a full year. So there are some situations that just go on and on and on. Special projects is a whole other animal.
There is another question from one of the participants online. You've talked about some of the greatest challenges of your career, but what would you say is the greatest reward of your work?
Wow, thank you for asking. That's a great question. I'm going to answer that in 2 different parts. As a news team, there's nothing better than working a really tough story and having it turn out. So what am I referring to? Jim DeFeedy did a story for months and months and months, and we got a corrupt mayor indicted through his reporting. The situation that I was making reference to with the sex assault, Jim DeFeedy broke that story. It was through our continual reporting efforts that we got this guy's sketch and the surveillance video out there on a daily basis for a week when no one in town was doing it. Nobody was touching it. And we did it, and the police attribute the fact that we did it on a regular basis, the fact that they caught him. That was incredibly gratifying. So there are moments like that where you, wow, you know, this is good. This is what we're supposed to be doing. Sometimes it could be as great as and something as innocuous and dumb to some people. When Peyton Manning, is he coming to Miami? Is he not coming to Miami? We had the helicopter up. We followed Peyton Manning. Everybody was judging us, but we had Peyton Manning, and Peyton Manning stopped to talk to our photographer, and it was a phenomenal moment in our newsroom because it was nothing that anyone had ever done before. On a personal level, what's been most rewarding to me is to have opportunities where I can put people in situations where they didn't think that they could do something, and they did it, and they kicked butt. And then they see themselves in a completely different way. And it's like, oh, I get it. Okay. And then that person is a whole new human being. Just literally before we came here, one of the reasons I was a little bit late and didn't get here at 12:15, as you guys asked, and I can't get into too much detail because it's part of our special projects unit. We had a team that was gone all last week working a story. And it was a very hard, complicated story that involved a lot of innovation and some risk. And before they left, I said, we need to take the risk from here to here. Let's dial it back. I don't want you to go to the extreme. No, but no, we're taking it here. So there was some apprehension as to, oh man, this is going to suck because we're not going to be able to go as far as we thought that we wanted to go. The team came back. They were just in the office this morning, and we, as I was going out, they were coming in, and the reporter in question was literally bouncing, smile from here to here, so happy because he'd never done anything like this. It was a story that he'd never thought that he could do in the way that I challenged him to do it, and he's a different person. And the story's going to rock, and it's going to be amazing. And he is a completely invigorated reporter. And the producer who went with him was our assistant news director, who never gets to leave the building. This is someone who gets all the crap dumped on him from everybody. You know, it's like, we need this, and they're complaining about that. And Liz is, I'm calling and saying, I need you to fix this. And this poor guy gets everything dumped on him. We took him out of the mix for a week, and he got to go on this story. And he's a completely different person. So that is unbelievably rewarding.
We have another great question from one of the online participants, and we have time for one more after this. So if you have a pressing question, go ahead and put it in now. And you probably have some good insight on this because of your experience in the industry, but the question is it still better for on-air talent to be, if they're gay or lesbian, to be in the closet, or is it okay for people to come out, or should they be expressing themselves on social media as expressing their sexuality?
I could care less what you do in your bedroom. That's none of my business. I could care less. What's your story? Tell me a good story. That's what I care about.
Well, but have you seen opportunities and attitudes evolve over time about people being able to be in the closet or out of the closet?
That's a different question. I don't think it should be anybody's business. But if you want to make it everybody's business, that's up to you. You know, I control what you do on the air. That's the extent of it. If what you want to become is an advocate, you're not a journalist. You know, those are two very different things. But if you want to be a reporter, it doesn't matter. You know, what you do is what you do in your personal space is your personal space. If you choose to use your reporting as an opportunity to be an advocate for something, then I need to be involved in what it is that you're doing. And we as a station, as a news department, we need to have that discussion together. The bottom line is, as a news director, if you want to, in terms of social media, start giving your personal opinion, it goes back to the question that you were asking. And I think that's really what you probably wanted to know. If you want to get into the area of giving your personal opinion in social media about X, Y, or Z, yeah, and you're an on-air person, I'm going to have to be involved. And we want to have those conversations on the front end as opposed to the back end. That's my advice to anybody who wants to be on the air. Anything that you want to do, I always consider what I write on social media. And I think anyone who's on the air should as well. How would I feel if what I wrote on my Twitter page today ended up on the front page of the Miami Herald? That's the question that you need to ask yourself if you're on the air, if you're in a leadership role. Today, I think I tweeted about shoes. Maybe, I don't remember. I tweeted about, there were some amazing the photographs that are coming out of Kiev are blowing my mind. I'm perfectly fine with that being on the front page of the Miami Herald or the New York Times. You know, and that's the question. You always want to be thoughtful before you do something like that, because sometimes, you know, social media, Twitter, and I'm talking about Twitter in particular, is such a fast medium. You know, it goes so quickly, and you think you're being all clever and funny and pithy, and somebody may not necessarily interpret it that way. Things can be misinterpreted very easily. So you want to make sure that you really consider that. And I think as to your whether you're in the closet, out of the closet, if that's going to be part of who you are and what you present yourself to the public, you need to have those conversations with whomever it is that's your news director ahead of time.
Do you have those same conversations with straight people?
I don't have that conversation. I don't care. Okay. I care what you write on Twitter if you're on the air, whether you're, no matter your gender, your race, your sex, who you're having sex, none of that's my business, but we need to know ahead of time if that's going to be part of what you're going to talk about.
Okay. So the last question is actually a great question for our students from a participant online, and it has to do with interns. How can interns working in the news industry contribute more and improve their talent in a newsroom environment?
Well, you have to be interested. 3/4 of the interns that we have could care less. They're there to fulfill a requirement. It's a waste of my time, it's a waste of your time. That serves no purpose. None. So if you want to be in news and you're going to be an intern, I don't know, you might want to watch the station's newscast where you're interning. No, really, I'm not trying to, God's honest truth. If you want to do something, do it, man, do it right. You know, if the internship is at a newspaper, wherever it is, own it, earn it. You never know what's going to happen. You never know what's going to happen. I was very fortunate that I was able to get in front of some people who thought that I could do something that I swore I couldn't do. I swore I couldn't do it. We just today had an intern, a former intern, lovely young lady who was unbelievably intelligent. We hired her. Today was her first day, but she cared and she was there all the time and she gave everything that she had. I have interns who, they come in, they answer the phone, they put people on hold, they leave. Don't waste your own time. Forget about mine. You're never going to cross my radar.
Well, in the interest of time, we're going to close here. So I want to thank you very much for your time and your insights and speaking so candidly to us. So if you'll join me all in thanking Liz Roldan. And this webinar will be available online in our archives at copenhagencenter.org. Thank you very much.
That's it.
Thank you.
Interns, just some advice for you guys. I try to do as much as I can for you guys when you intern. Like I try, like if they put you in, let's say they put you at the assignment desk. I try to teach you guys as much as I can. If I see that you're willing to learn and that you care, listen, I'll help you with whatever you want. I try to teach you the assignment desk. If you tell me I don't like the assignment desk, I like producing, or I want to do this, you know, we'll figure out a way to move you to that section and like help you. But just a little word of advice: don't go in there and just sit and answer phones like she said. If you really want to do something, you see something in the newsroom that you really want to do, say something to whoever is in charge of you. Just say, you know what, I want to go on the street. Can you get me to go out on the street, you know, once a week or, you know, once every 2 weeks with a reporter? And, you know, I try to do that. I just got into this position not too long ago. I came from special projects, but I kept seeing this poor kid just sitting there, not doing anything. They had Tyson, whatever his name is.
Ryan.
So I'm like,
We just hired him
have
too.
you gone out? And he's like, towards the end of the week, he goes, no. And I said, you've never gone out before? He's like, no. And I go, would you like to go? And he's like, yeah. And he lit up like a Christmas tree. I'm like, just don't sit there. If there's something you really want to do, something you really want to learn, go out and field produce or whatever. Ask whoever your boss is, whoever's in charge of you. Hey, can I do more of this, or can I do this? Can I go and look at a producer and see how he builds his show? Or can I just, don't be afraid to ask. The worst thing they can tell you is no, but they're not. If they're somebody who's willing to help you and they see that you, when we see you guys want to learn, we'll teach you whatever you want to learn. But when we see that you guys just sit there and you're quiet and you're shy and don't want to say anything, I try to push them sometimes because I want to help you guys. But, you know, just speak out, because there are a lot of people out there, old school, that will help you and, you know, get you out there and do stuff. So don't be shy, just ask.
And often shyness is confused with lack of interest.
Right.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But you can't be shy in news.
Right.
I mean, that's the bottom line. You just can't be. You have to be aggressive in a good way. You know, you don't want to be obnoxious, but you have to. Again, it goes back to the very first thing that I said. What do you want? What do you want? Ask yourself, what do you want? If what you want is to be a PR person, then go be the best PR person you could possibly be, and start and go through and learn from the people that you can get yourself around. If what you want to do is be a journalist, then do it. If you know, and there's a million things that you can do within the news department that don't involve being on the air. Being on the air is a whole other complicated mess of stuff, you know, and then you have to deal with, I get to tell you how to do your hair and what to do with your makeup and what you can wear and change your clothes, but that's my job, you know, that's what I'm here for. I'm here to make sure that the station, our look, our feel, our stories, everything that we do is consistent with who we are as an entity. That's my job, you know? So I don't want you showing up with, if you're, you know, I have long hair. I could never have long hair if I was on the air, period. Why? Does anybody know why? No, because it distracts. It's the only thing you pay attention to. So when you have big necklaces and all this stuff going on, I'm paying attention. Oh my God, I love your necklace. It's fantastic. I have no idea what you're saying. Not a word. Because I'm obsessed with your necklace. And oh my God, is it from J. Crew? Where's it from? I got to look. And I don't know what you're talking about. So there's this, you know, in the minute that you're on the air, your image and everything about you from your mannerisms, your hands, your fingernails, everything comes into play. Because you may not realize it, but you give that person that's on the air approximately 3 seconds of your attention before you make a decision. Am I going to watch or not? 3 seconds. I can decide in 2.
Thank you so much, and thanks, students, for your participation.
Thanks.
And have a great rest of the day.
Hugo had asked me to stay, thought that someone might. Is that Hugo back there?
Just want to say hello. I teach broadcasting here at the
Hi,
school.
I'm
So
Liz.
glad
How
that
are
you were
you?
able to come
Thank you so
and
much for
join us.
having me.
I wanted to talk. Is she in charge of the interns? I'm running the internship program.
Sandy, you should probably talk to her. Yeah, Sandy Antonio is her name.
Okay.